The universe is always attentive, and this practice is more than just a quiet pause in your day. It is a deliberate way of reshaping the deeper layers of your mind so they begin to align with a reality filled with wealth, love, joy, success, and genuine inner satisfaction. Each time you return to this, you are gently influencing your subconscious, guiding it toward new patterns of belief and expectation. Over time, these inner patterns begin to shape how you see yourself and how life responds to you. What you repeat consistently becomes what you accept as real, and what you accept as real begins to shape your entire experience of life. With every listening, you are planting new inner seeds, seeds of self-trust, prosperity, opportunity, and emotional security. These seeds do not stay still, they grow quietly beneath the surface of your awareness. That is why consistency matters. Make this a daily practice, something you return to as a way of resetting your energy and realigning your focus. Over time, this repetition creates a shift in identity, and that shift naturally leads to transformation in your outer world. Take a slow, deep breath in now and release it gently. Let your body soften and your mind loosen its grip on old memories, past worries, and limiting thoughts. Allow yourself to let go of hesitation and resistance. In this moment, you are open to receiving, open to change, open to a better version of your life unfolding without force. Everything begins right here, in this quiet willingness to release what no longer supports you. I naturally receive everything I desire with ease and speed. I remain open to abundance in all its forms. I trust life and feel supported by the universe at every step. I am fully deserving of goodness, success, and fulfillment. Wealth flows toward me effortlessly and consistently. Money enters my life with ease and frequency. Success follows my actions in everything I do. Opportunities surround me and find me without struggle. I am naturally aligned with prosperity, and each breath strengthens my connection to joy and abundance. I release fear, doubt, and limitation, and I step into confidence, love, and self-worth. My relationships are healthy, aligned, and deeply fulfilling. I attract people who support, respect, and understand me. My ideas come to me clearly and easily, and I act with courage and calm awareness. Life unfolds in my favor, and I trust its timing completely. I am guided by inner wisdom and make decisions with clarity. I create value in the world and receive value in return. Miracles and unexpected blessings naturally flow into my life. I am safe, I am supported, and I am at peace with who I am becoming. I release old fears and make peace with my past. I embrace change with openness and grace. I forgive myself and others, allowing emotional freedom to expand within me. I care for my mind, body, and spirit with respect and love. I choose peace over pressure and gratitude over worry. I trust my journey and recognize that everything is unfolding in my favor. I allow myself to grow into my full potential without hesitation. I am connected to something greater, and I move in harmony with life itself. I step into each day with confidence, clarity, and calm strength. I am worthy of love, success, and happiness in all its forms. I welcome new opportunities with openness and excitement. My energy is magnetic, and I naturally attract positive experiences and meaningful connections. I am becoming more aligned, more free, and more empowered every day. I trust myself deeply, I honor my growth, and I allow life to support me fully. I am enough as I am, and I am expanding into everything I am meant to be. I am deeply aligned with divine flow, allowing life to guide me with ease and clarity. My inner world is filled with light, and I treat myself with patience, kindness, and understanding. I remain open to higher wisdom, trusting the subtle guidance that moves through my intuition. I no longer operate from fear or hesitation. Instead, I allow myself to shine naturally and confidently. Joy comes to me effortlessly, and today I choose alignment over struggle, presence over pressure. I express who I am without holding back, knowing that my dreams are already in motion and unfolding with clarity and speed. I attract what is truly meant for me, and I create space in my life for rest, happiness, and deep emotional fulfillment. I honor my journey and recognize how far I have already come. I allow miracles to meet me where I am, trusting divine timing without resistance. Gratitude flows through me easily as I release anything that blocks my growth or abundance. I naturally vibrate at a frequency of wealth, peace, and expansion. Unexpected blessings feel normal in my reality, and I welcome them with openness and trust. I stay grounded in faith, allowing life to support me fully while I move forward with calm strength. Today I glow with powerful, steady energy. I offer myself grace in every moment and allow my presence alone to open doors that effort once tried to force. I move through life with kindness, clarity, and intention, expanding into abundance and peace at the same time. Golden opportunities find me without struggle, and I remain open to receiving more in every form. I step fully into my potential, acting from purpose, passion, and inner certainty. Joy comes naturally to me, and I trust my own inner brilliance even when I cannot see the full picture yet. I celebrate all expressions of abundance in my life, knowing that prosperity is not limited to one form. I rest in trust, believing that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. My thoughts are intentional and uplifting, guiding me into alignment with divine wealth and inner freedom. I enjoy the feeling of being supported by life itself, and I welcome success as something natural and simple. Creativity flows through me as I allow myself to receive inspiration without resistance. I remain connected to a deeper intelligence that constantly guides me toward what is right for me. Each day, I open myself more fully to life's possibilities. I breathe in clarity, confidence, and peace, allowing them to become my natural state. I receive opportunities, income, and experiences that support my growth with ease. I rise with purpose, guided by intuition and grounded in trust. My energy feels magnetic because I no longer block what is meant for me. I am grateful for every part of my journey, and I move forward knowing I am supported, guided, and deeply aligned with a life that reflects abundance, love, and quiet inner power. Today I fully accept and embrace who I am at my core. Life unfolds for me with natural ease and quiet elegance, and with each passing day I find myself becoming more confident in my own presence. I no longer seek approval to feel worthy. Instead, I express myself freely and authentically, and in doing so, I naturally inspire others to do the same. A deep sense of self-love grows within me, and I carry pride in who I am becoming. I choose to notice the good in life, even in simple moments, and I trust that my future is unfolding in a direction that is bright, aligned, and meaningful. I move with calm strength, guided by inner clarity, and I allow joy to exist in the smallest details of my daily experience. I am deeply connected to a higher flow of life, and I move in harmony with it rather than against it. My inner world feels full of light, and I treat myself with compassion instead of judgment. I remain open to higher wisdom that comes through intuition and stillness, and I trust myself enough to follow it. Fear no longer defines my decisions. Instead, I step forward with confidence, knowing that what is meant for me is already making its way into my life. I choose alignment over struggle, ease over resistance, and clarity over confusion. My dreams are not distant anymore. They are actively forming, and I trust their timing without forcing outcomes. I make space in my life for joy, rest, and emotional balance. I acknowledge how far I have come and allow myself to feel gratitude for my progress. I welcome miracles without resistance, knowing they can appear in ways I do not expect. I release internal blocks, limiting beliefs, and anything that keeps me from receiving fully. My energy aligns with abundance, not just in wealth, but in peace, opportunity, and meaningful connection. I feel grounded in trust, even when I cannot see every step ahead clearly. Life supports me in ways both subtle and powerful, and I allow that support to reach me. I carry myself with a quiet, powerful energy that naturally creates openings and opportunities. I no longer force outcomes. Instead, I allow life to meet me halfway. I lead with kindness, clarity, and presence, and I trust that my authenticity is enough to guide me toward what is right. I remain open to receiving more in every form: love, growth, success, and inner fulfillment. I honor my purpose and allow myself to act from passion rather than pressure. My inner strength grows stronger because it is rooted in self-trust rather than external validation. Each day, I expand into more of my potential with ease rather than struggle. I breathe in clarity and confidence, and I let go of anything that weighs me down. I receive what is meant for me naturally, including opportunities, growth, and unexpected blessings. I trust my journey completely and move through life with a steady sense of peace. I am supported, guided, and aligned, and I allow life to reflect back the abundance, love, and calm strength that already exists within me. This kind of practice is essentially about shaping your inner state so that it becomes the default filter through which you experience life. When you repeatedly affirm ideas like abundance, alignment, self-worth, and trust, you're not just saying words, you're training attention. Over time, your mind begins to look for evidence that matches what you consistently focus on, and that changes how you interpret events, opportunities, and even challenges. Two people can go through the same situation, but the one whose inner narrative is grounded in trust and possibility will naturally perceive more options, more meaning, and more openings for action. A big part of this is emotional conditioning. Your subconscious doesn't respond strongly to occasional thoughts, it responds to repetition combined with feeling. That's why practices like this often encourage emotional presence while speaking or listening. When a state of calm, certainty, or gratitude is repeatedly experienced, even briefly, it starts to become more familiar. And what feels familiar eventually feels normal, which is how identity shifts slowly take place. You don't force change through pressure, you create it through repetition until a new baseline is established inside you. There's also a psychological side involving attention bias. When your mind is repeatedly exposed to ideas like opportunity, support, or growth, it becomes more sensitive to those patterns in daily life. This doesn't mean everything magically changes outside, but your awareness becomes more selective. You notice things you previously overlooked, and that alone can change your decisions and actions. Small shifts in perception often lead to bigger shifts in direction over time. Another layer is the relationship between self-talk and behavior. The way you internally describe yourself tends to influence how you act without you realizing it. If your internal language is filled with limitation, hesitation, or doubt, your behavior becomes more cautious and restrained. When that language shifts toward confidence, openness, and trust, your actions naturally become more expressive and aligned. It's not that obstacles disappear, it's that your response to them becomes more grounded and less reactive. Over time, this kind of inner work can create a sense of emotional stability that isn't easily shaken by external circumstances. Instead of constantly reacting to what is happening, you start responding from a more centered place. That doesn't mean life becomes perfect or effortless, but it does mean you're less internally disrupted by uncertainty. And that stability itself becomes a kind of strength, because it allows you to think more clearly, choose more intentionally, and recover more quickly when things don't go as expected. At its core, this whole approach is about identity shaping through repetition, attention, and emotional reinforcement. What you consistently affirm and emotionally engage with tends to become what you believe. And what you believe subtly guides how you live, decide, and create your reality over time. One deeper layer of this practice is how it gradually rewires your relationship with uncertainty. Most people don't actually struggle because life is difficult, but because uncertainty feels unsafe. The mind tries to fill that uncertainty with prediction, fear, or control. When you repeatedly expose yourself to ideas of trust, flow, and inner stability, you are essentially teaching your nervous system that uncertainty doesn't automatically mean danger. Over time, this reduces internal resistance, and you start moving through life with less emotional tension even when outcomes are unknown. Another important aspect is the shift from reactive living to intentional living. Normally, people react to what happens first and then build meaning afterward. With consistent inner conditioning like this, the order slowly reverses. You begin from a chosen state, calm, aligned, confident, and then respond to life from that state. This creates a noticeable difference in behavior. Decisions become less impulsive, emotions become less chaotic, and there is a stronger sense of direction, even when external circumstances haven't changed yet. There is also a subtle but powerful effect on self-concept. Your self-concept is basically the story your mind believes about who you are. If that story is shaped by limitation, past mistakes, or fear, then your actions unconsciously stay within those boundaries. But when you repeatedly expose yourself to identity-based statements like being worthy, capable, abundant, or aligned, you slowly begin to loosen those old boundaries. It doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens in small internal negotiations where the mind stops rejecting positive possibilities as not for me. Over time, your emotional baseline begins to shift as well. Instead of feeling occasional moments of positivity surrounded by doubt, you start experiencing a more stable background state. This doesn't mean you are always happy or never face problems. It means your default emotional tone becomes more grounded, more open, and less dominated by fear or lack. From that baseline, even challenges feel different because they no longer define your entire inner world. There is also a feedback loop between belief and behavior. When you begin to believe more in possibility, you naturally start acting in slightly different ways. Those small behavioral changes then produce slightly different outcomes, which reinforce the new belief. This loop is how long-term transformation actually builds. It rarely happens through one big breakthrough, it happens through repeated alignment between what you think, feel, and do. Another layer is the role of attention. Whatever you consistently focus on becomes psychologically louder in your mind. If your attention is trained towards scarcity, fear, or limitation, your mind will continuously find evidence for those themes. But if your attention is repeatedly directed toward opportunity, gratitude, and expansion, your perception begins to reorganize itself around those themes instead. It's not that reality changes instantly, it's that your interpretation of reality becomes more expansive, which directly affects your choices. Eventually, the goal of this kind of practice is integration. At first, the affirmations feel like something you are trying to believe, but with repetition and emotional consistency, they start to feel less like statements and more like natural inner truths. When that happens, you no longer need constant effort to stay in a positive state. It becomes your default way of being, and everything else flows from that. Another important layer of this whole process is how the mind gradually stops separating inner experience and outer reality. At the beginning, there is a clear gap between what you say in affirmations and what you actually see in life. That gap is where doubt usually lives. But with repetition, the brain starts reducing that gap by normalizing the new internal narrative. It doesn't happen because reality instantly changes, but because your perception of reality becomes more flexible. You stop interpreting everything through the same old emotional lens, and that alone makes life feel different. There is also something happening at the level of emotional memory. Your mind stores past emotional experiences and uses them as reference points for what to expect in the future. If those memories are mostly tied to stress, rejection, or lack, then the body will automatically prepare for similar experiences even when nothing is happening. Through consistent repetition of calmer, more empowering inner states, you begin to create new emotional reference points. Over time, these newer experiences become just as familiar, and the nervous system starts relying on them instead of the older patterns. Another shift happens in how desire itself is experienced. At first, desire often feels like lack, something missing that needs to be obtained. But as you work with states of abundance and inner fulfillment, desire becomes less painful and more creative. Instead of chasing what you don't have, you begin to move toward what feels aligned. This changes motivation completely. You are no longer driven by tension or desperation, but by clarity and inner pull. That is a much more stable form of progress because it doesn't depend on emotional extremes. There is also a quiet but powerful restructuring of identity boundaries. Most people unconsciously define themselves by limitations like past failures, financial history, or emotional wounds. When you repeatedly expose yourself to a different identity narrative, the mind starts questioning those fixed labels. You begin to think, maybe I am not just my past patterns. That question alone is powerful because it creates space for change. Once identity becomes less rigid, behavior becomes more adaptable, and growth feels less like struggle and more like expansion. Over time, this process also changes your relationship with effort. Instead of believing that everything must be forced or struggled for, you start noticing that aligned action often feels lighter. You still take action, but it is guided more by intuition and clarity than pressure. This reduces burnout and increases consistency because you are no longer fighting yourself internally to move forward. Eventually, something subtle happens. Inner resistance decreases. You don't argue with your goals as much. You don't constantly doubt your direction. You don't overanalyze every possibility before acting. There is a quieter confidence that builds underneath everything. It's not loud or emotional, it's steady. And from that steadiness, decisions become simpler, focus becomes stronger, and life feels less fragmented. At the deepest level, this is really about retraining the mind to stop treating positive states as temporary and start treating them as normal. When peace, confidence, and abundance are no longer occasional highs, but familiar inner territory, your entire experience of life shifts, not because everything outside is perfect, but because you are no longer internally unstable in the face of it. A deeper way to understand this is that your mind is always forming predictions about reality before reality actually happens. These predictions are based on your past emotional conditioning, repeated thoughts, and dominant beliefs. So if someone has spent years in stress, doubt, or scarcity thinking, their mind doesn't just remember those experiences, it expects them. That expectation quietly shapes how they interpret new situations. What this kind of practice does is slowly interrupt that automatic prediction system and introduce new expectations that are rooted in trust, possibility, and inner stability. Another important shift is how your internal dialogue begins to change without forcing it. At first, affirmations feel external, almost like something you're trying to convince yourself of. But over time, the repetition starts to soften the resistance in your self-talk. Instead of immediately defaulting to "this won't work" or "this is not for me," the mind begins to open space for alternative interpretations. Even small moments like that matter, because they weaken old mental habits that once felt automatic and unquestionable. There is also a gradual transformation in emotional recovery speed. People usually think emotional growth means never feeling negative emotions, but that's not realistic. The real shift is how quickly you return to balance after disruption. With consistent inner conditioning like this, setbacks, delays, or disappointments don't pull you into long emotional spirals the way they used to. You still feel things, but you don't stay stuck in them as long. That resilience becomes a hidden form of strength that influences everything you do. At a deeper level, what's really shifting through this kind of practice is your baseline identity stability. Most people don't realize how much their sense of self fluctuates depending on circumstances: money, relationships, success, or failure. When things go well, they feel confident. When things don't, their identity contracts. This creates an unstable internal foundation. Repeated affirmations of abundance, worthiness, and alignment gradually build a more consistent internal reference point, so your sense of self is no longer completely dependent on external conditions. Another subtle change happens in how your mind handles interpretation speed. Normally, the brain reacts instantly to events based on old conditioning. A delay, a rejection, or an uncertainty automatically gets labeled as bad or threatening. With consistent inner reprogramming, that automatic labeling starts to slow down. You don't immediately assign meaning to everything. Instead, there is a brief pause where multiple interpretations become possible. That pause is where emotional freedom begins, because it stops one negative story from taking full control. There is also a gradual shift in emotional dependency. Many people unconsciously depend on external validation, outcomes, or reassurance to feel okay internally. As you repeatedly reinforce states of inner sufficiency, being enough, being supported, being aligned, that dependency weakens. You begin to experience a more self-contained sense of emotional grounding. This doesn't mean you stop caring about people or outcomes. It means your internal state is not constantly being borrowed from outside sources. Another important development is the way your mind starts reorganizing memory. You don't erase the past, but you stop using it as the dominant reference for what is possible. Instead of "this is who I've always been," the mind begins to accept "this is who I can become." That shift is subtle, but it changes decision-making at the root level. You stop filtering future possibilities through past limitations as strongly as before. Over time, this creates a more flexible identity structure. Instead of being fixed in one self-concept, you begin to experience yourself as adaptable. This adaptability is what allows growth without constant inner resistance. Change stops feeling like a threat to identity and starts feeling like a natural extension of it. That alone reduces a lot of inner tension people carry when trying to improve their lives. There is also a noticeable shift in how emotional meaning is assigned to events. Earlier, small setbacks might carry heavy emotional weight because they were linked to deeper beliefs like "I am not good enough" or "things never work for me." As those deeper beliefs soften, events lose some of their emotional intensity. They become more neutral data rather than personal judgments. This creates a calmer mental environment where recovery from setbacks becomes much faster. Another layer is how intention and attention begin to align more consistently. When your attention is scattered by doubt, fear, and contradiction, your actions also become inconsistent. But as inner narratives become more unified, attention becomes more stable. That stability makes it easier to follow through, stay focused, and maintain direction over time without needing constant emotional motivation. Eventually, something very fundamental changes. You stop experiencing your life as something happening to you and start experiencing it as something unfolding through you. That doesn't mean you lose awareness of challenges, but your internal position shifts from resistance to participation. You are no longer in constant negotiation with life. You are moving with it more often than against it. At a deeper psychological level, this kind of inner repetition gradually reshapes how your mind builds meaning out of everyday experience. Most people don't see reality directly. They see interpretations formed through past conditioning. So the same event can feel discouraging to one person and neutral or even useful to another. As you consistently feed your mind ideas of trust, alignment, abundance, and inner strength, those interpretations slowly begin to shift. Life doesn't necessarily change first, your reading of life does, and that is what eventually changes your direction. Another important layer is how the nervous system learns emotional safety. If someone has spent a long time in stress-based thinking, their body becomes used to tension as a default state. Even when nothing is wrong, there is an underlying sense of urgency or unease. Repetition of calm, grounded, and expansive inner language gradually teaches the body that it doesn't need to stay in that heightened state. Over time, calm stops feeling like a temporary experience and starts becoming the new normal. That shift alone changes how decisions are made, because decisions made from calm are very different from decisions made from tension. There is also a slow restructuring of internal identity boundaries. Many people live inside invisible mental limits like, "This is just how my life is," or "People like me don't experience that." These are not facts, they are learned boundaries. Through repeated exposure to expanded identity statements, those boundaries begin to weaken. At first, the mind may resist them, but over time it becomes less certain about those old limits. And once certainty weakens, possibility starts to enter. That is often where real change begins, not in action, but in belief loosening. Another subtle transformation happens in how desire is felt internally. In a lack-based mindset, desire often feels heavy, urgent, or emotionally charged. It carries a sense of distance between where I am and where I should be. As inner alignment strengthens, desire becomes lighter and less desperate. It turns into clarity rather than pressure. Instead of feeling like something missing, it feels like something unfolding. That shift removes a lot of emotional suffering that usually surrounds goals. There is also a change in how your mind processes repetition itself. Normally, repetition leads to boredom or dismissal because the brain filters repeated information as already known. But when repetition is combined with emotional meaning, it slowly rewires subconscious associations. The same ideas, worth, abundance, trust, stop being just words and start becoming emotional states that your body recognizes faster. That recognition is what creates consistency in behavior even when motivation fluctuates. Over time, internal contradictions begin to dissolve. Earlier, you might have had one part of you that wants growth and another part that expects failure or delay. That internal split creates friction, procrastination, and confusion. As alignment practices continue, those conflicting narratives begin to merge. You stop arguing with yourself as much. Thoughts, emotions, and intentions start pointing in the same direction more often, which creates a smoother sense of inner movement. Another shift is how control is understood. In the beginning, control is often seen as the solution to uncertainty. The more uncertain life feels, the more the mind tries to tighten control. But through repeated experiences of inner grounding, you begin to realize that control is limited and often exhausting. Instead, you start focusing more on influence, your thoughts, responses, actions, and attention. That shift reduces mental strain because you are no longer trying to manage everything, only what is actually within your reach. Eventually, something very subtle happens. You stop treating alignment as something you practice and start experiencing it as something you return to naturally. It becomes less of an effort and more of a baseline orientation. When that happens, life doesn't feel like constant correction anymore. It feels like adjustment, flow, and participation in something that is already moving forward, with you included in it rather than separate from it. At a deeper psychological level, what continues to develop here is the gradual rewriting of your internal default story. Every person has a background narrative running in the mind, an ongoing interpretation of who they are, what life is like, and what is likely to happen next. Most of the time, people don't consciously choose this story. It forms from repetition, memory, and emotional experience. Through consistent exposure to empowering inner language, that background story slowly starts to shift. It doesn't erase the past, but it stops letting the past fully define the present. Over time, your emotional world also becomes less fragmented. Instead of being pulled in many directions by conflicting thoughts and beliefs, there is more coherence. Your mind, emotions, and actions begin to point in the same direction more often. That coherence creates a feeling of inner flow, where you are not constantly fighting yourself internally. And when there is less internal conflict, energy that was once used for overthinking or doubt becomes available for clarity, creativity, and action. It is also important to understand that this transformation is not about reaching a perfect or permanently elevated state. It is about stability. You learn to return to balance more quickly. You learn to interpret life with more clarity instead of distortion. You learn to trust yourself even when outcomes are uncertain. That ability to come back to center again and again is what creates real long-term change, because it prevents temporary emotional states from defining your entire direction. Eventually, something very quiet but powerful happens. Life stops feeling like something you are constantly trying to fix or chase and starts feeling like something you are learning to move with. There is more acceptance, but also more intention, more ease, but also more clarity, more openness, but also more grounded action. You are no longer only reacting to life, you are participating in it from a more conscious and aligned place. And from that place, growth feels less like struggle and more like unfolding. You are not forcing yourself into a new identity. You are allowing it to emerge naturally as your inner world becomes more aligned with what you have been affirming, embodying, and reinforcing over time. At a more foundational level, this process is really about how the brain updates its model of what is true for me. The mind is constantly predicting outcomes based on past patterns, and those predictions quietly shape emotions before anything even happens. If your internal model is built around limitation, then even neutral situations can feel slightly heavy or restricted. When you consistently expose yourself to ideas of expansion, trust, and alignment, you are slowly feeding the brain a new model. Over time, that updated model starts to take priority over the old one, even if the external world hasn't fully changed yet. Another key shift happens in how emotional energy is distributed throughout the day. In a reactive state, a large portion of mental energy gets spent on overthinking, doubt, replaying scenarios, or anticipating problems. This leaves less energy for creativity, clarity, and action. As inner repetition of calmer and more empowering states increases, the mind becomes less occupied with internal conflict. That freed up energy naturally begins to move toward more constructive directions, planning, creating, focusing, and engaging with life more fully. There is also a slow but powerful change in how self-observation works. Instead of constantly judging yourself through a critical inner voice, you begin to observe your thoughts with more distance. You notice fear without immediately identifying with it. You notice doubt without fully believing it. That separation is important because it weakens the automatic link between thought and identity. You are no longer every thought that appears in your mind. You become the awareness observing those thoughts. That shift alone reduces emotional overwhelm significantly. Another layer is how expectation begins to soften. People often carry rigid expectations about how and when things should happen, and when reality doesn't match those timelines, frustration builds. Through consistent inner alignment work, expectations become less rigid and more fluid. You still have direction, but you are less emotionally attached to exact timing or exact pathways. This flexibility reduces disappointment and creates more room for unexpected opportunities to be recognized instead of dismissed. There is also a gradual shift in how confidence is generated. Instead of confidence depending on outcomes or external validation, it starts to come from internal consistency. You begin to trust yourself, not because everything always works out, but because you are no longer abandoning your own inner direction when things feel uncertain. That self-trust becomes a stable form of confidence that doesn't fluctuate as easily with external events. Over time, emotional triggers also begin to lose intensity. Situations that once created strong reactions start to feel less charged. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb, it means you become less easily pulled off center. There is more space between what happens and how you respond. That space allows you to choose your response rather than being driven by automatic emotional patterns formed in the past. Another important transformation is in how identity continuity forms. Earlier, your identity might have felt fragmented, different versions of yourself depending on mood, environment, or circumstance. As inner repetition continues, those fragments start to align into a more coherent sense of self. You feel more like the same person across different situations rather than shifting dramatically depending on external conditions. That continuity creates stability, and stability supports long-term growth. Eventually, the entire process leads to a subtle but profound shift. Life feels less like something you are trying to fix and more like something you are learning to move with. You are no longer constantly trying to force alignment externally because a sense of alignment is already being cultivated internally. From that place, actions become clearer, decisions feel simpler, and even challenges feel less like disruptions and more like part of a larger unfolding process you are learning to participate in with more ease. At an even deeper level, what's happening here is a gradual rewiring of how your brain assigns importance to experiences. The mind doesn't treat all thoughts equally. It ranks them based on emotional intensity and repetition. So when certain ideas like abundance, safety, alignment, and self-worth are repeated consistently, they slowly gain priority status in your internal system. That means they start influencing your perception more strongly than older, fear-based patterns that once felt automatic. This isn't an overnight switch. It's a slow shift in what your mind considers credible. Another layer is how your inner world starts becoming less reactive and more structured. In a reactive state, your thoughts are often scattered, pulled in different directions by emotion, memory, and external input. But with repeated grounding in stable, affirming inner language, your mind begins to organize itself differently. Thoughts don't disappear, but they stop spiraling as easily. There is more coherence, more direction, and less internal noise competing for attention. That mental clarity makes even simple decisions feel easier. There is also a transformation in how emotional meaning is constructed. Earlier, your mind might automatically attach strong meaning to small events. Delays feel like rejection. Silence feels like loss. Uncertainty feels like danger. As inner conditioning continues, those automatic interpretations begin to loosen. You start questioning your first emotional reaction instead of immediately believing it. That questioning creates space, and that space allows more balanced interpretations to form. Over time, this reduces unnecessary emotional suffering created by assumption rather than reality. Another important shift is the reduction of internal urgency. Many people live with a constant background feeling that they are behind or that something needs to be fixed quickly. That urgency creates pressure, and pressure often leads to rushed decisions or emotional exhaustion. Through repeated experiences of calm, trust, and alignment, the nervous system slowly learns that not everything requires immediate reaction. This reduces the constant inner acceleration and replaces it with a more stable pace of thinking and acting. There is also a gradual change in how self-image is maintained. Instead of constantly updating your identity based on mistakes or temporary setbacks, you begin to hold a more stable image of yourself. You stop defining yourself by isolated moments and start seeing patterns over time. That broader perspective reduces self-judgment and increases patience with your own growth process. You begin to understand yourself as someone who is evolving, not someone who is fixed. Another subtle but powerful change happens in how possibilities are filtered. In a limited mindset, the brain unconsciously filters out opportunities that don't match old beliefs. Even if something good appears, it may be dismissed as unrealistic or not for me. As your internal narrative expands, that filtering system becomes more open. You begin to notice options, ideas, and paths that were always there but previously ignored. That expanded perception directly influences the choices you make. Over time, motivation itself becomes less volatile. Instead of relying on emotional highs or external pressure, you start operating from a quieter, more consistent internal drive. It's not excitement that pushes you forward, it's clarity. And clarity is much more sustainable than emotion because it doesn't fluctuate as dramatically. Eventually, something very important shifts. You stop relating to your growth as something distant or separate from you. Instead of trying to become better, There is a growing sense that you are simply uncovering what was already there beneath old conditioning. That reframing reduces resistance significantly. Growth stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like revealing, allowing, and stabilizing what is already naturally emerging within you.